YouTube, you guys seeing me normally and okay? Or are you seeing me like rotated oddly? YouTube just made a request of me that was bizarre. All right, good morning, family. What's going on? How is everybody? Let's see. Let's see here. Let me jump on the TikTok. We're having a system issue with TikTok. What is with the tech issues lately? What's going on here? YouTube, you look cloudy. How's that? That looks a little better. All right. Yeah, it looks like TikTok is having an issue. So we'll let TikTok come on a little bit later then. Restart that device. See what's going on there. And as soon as I restarted the device, it came online. Gotta love it. All right, guys. What do we got going on today? So, landscape is changing. Bond interest rates are still looking great. However, there were no new bonds issued last year, as we've already covered. I would not be surprised if no new bonds were issued this year, which doesn't affect the ability to utilize the bond ladder, doesn't affect the ability to use those bonds to live off of and come here and retire. It just means that the bonds are reopens of former bonds, which are good in a way because you already know the interest rate of those bonds. However, the taxability of the trust structure has changed. And so what they did was they pulled the carpet out from under us. And so what I mean by that is they effectively repealed the tax exemptions without actually repealing them. So how did they do that? So initially, your trust structure was tax exempt by statute. Okay, so your trust structure was initially tax exempt by statute. Hold on, it's making a bunch of noise before I go up here. All right, so your actual trust structure was exempt by statute right off the bat, right? So the trust, tax exempt. Then they had some exemptions that fell onto the distributions to the beneficiaries. So if you were distributing money to the beneficiary of the trust for education, 100% tax exempt. If you were distributing money for medical treatment, 100% tax exempt. They had a weird category in there that called early, what was it? Early adulthood housing, whatever that means. 100% tax exempt, whatever that means. Right? So those categories were tax exempt, uncapped. And then the categories that were capped, or the category that was capped, was that every single beneficiary got 10 million per year tax exempt. Okay. So now they've adjusted it at the top. So now the trust as an entity, the incorporated trust, because that is the highest level of trust that you can get in this jurisdiction. The incorporated trust is now taxable. All right. So again, they didn't repeal the ones below, but it's the money is taxed first anyway. So now it doesn't matter, right? So essentially what ended up happening is Now the beneficiaries get unlimited tax exempt distributions because the government considers the tax already paid. They consider taxing the beneficiary to be double taxation because they're going to tax the trust at the corporate income tax level. Right now, unlike American trusts, there's no accelerated tax schedule for generational wealth trust in this jurisdiction. So that's solid. The other thing is obviously compounding is going to outpace that tax structure. So there's that. But there's less. It used to be very, very kind of dumb, let it go, it'll handle itself situation because your bonds would do a withholding tax of 10%. That withholding tax of 10% or 15%, depending on the bond, but we haven't seen a 15% in a long time. So 10% withholding tax. That 10% would be what's called a final tax. Technically, when you have a final tax, you don't even have to file a tax return. You still should, but technically you don't have to, right? And so what'll end up happening is they take that 10% off the top. You never even see that 10%. And that's your final tax. You get a certificate. It says withholding tax certificate. And that's what you should be submitting with the tax return at the end of the year. But you don't have to, because the people you're submitting the tax return to are the people who gave you the certificate, right? So if you don't submit it, no one gets in trouble for that, but it messes up your records. It might trigger like an audit or whatever. You still wouldn't get in trouble because you're good, but it just doesn't make sense to go that route. So just file your tax return. Anyway, now that would be a credit, not a final tax. So that's good and bad. From the bad side, it's now more complicated, right? And you technically owe some more taxes, right? From the good side, it doesn't particularly matter because if you're savvy enough to own a trust, you're probably savvy enough to have a corporate trustee. The corporate trustee needs to be paid. And under the tax code, that is a deductible payment, right? So now you have 30% of your income, right? Your whatever money you started the trust with, funded the trust with, all that stuff, money going from the settler into the trust, that's tax exempt still. So the money you make, the interest on the investment, 30% of that is now up for tax. If you were using bonds or a bond ladder to do that, 10% has already been removed. Okay. And it's 10% on whatever it is that you made. So let's say bonds were all you had, which is how a lot of our people start. The bonds are all they got. They got one bond ladder, pays out every month of the year. That's how they're starting. Okay, great. So let's say the bond ladder pays you 1 million local currency a year. Okay. So when they take their 10% of withholding tax at 10% equals 100,000. Okay. But let's say you turn around and you pay your trustee 10%. Okay, great. You just paid the trust company 10%. That's 100,000. And let's say that you build some schools for some kids, whatever, and you donate to charity another 10%. So that's another 100,000, right? So 200,000, 100,000 to the trustee company, 100,000 to charity. Now your taxable income is 800,000, but they just charged you based on 100,000 with the withholding tax, and it's no longer a final tax. It's now a tax credit. So what happens to you? You get a refund, right? So now you get a tax refund. That was impossible before because it was the final tax. So you just lost that money to the government, and that was the end of it. Now you can control where that money goes. You can take all of that money and put it in the hands of the charities that you think are doing the right thing. If you think the government's corrupt, if you think the government's this, that, the third, you can now deduct that down so that they get the minimum amount of money possible while you still pay the same amount in taxes, right? In this situation, you'd actually pay less in taxes, right? So no matter how much you push it down, if you're like, oh, well, then I'll do 300,000. Well, that's great, but that's not going to eliminate, right, the entire tax a little bit. It's just going to push it all the way down. So now that's where you've now gone too far, because had you just paid the government, you would have paid 300,000, right? So if you pay 100,000 to the trustee, turn around, pay 100,000 to charity or whatever. Now your taxable income is the 800. Even if you take another 50,000, because maintenance on property owned is also deductible. So if you take another 50,000 to do maintenance on your property, right, you're still good because you're at 250 at that point, and then you're going to get the refund because now it's based on 750,000, not the 100,000. So now the refund you get that might equal you out, but as soon as you get to the point where even with the refund you've paid more than 300, now you screwed yourself up. Now you paid more money. Right now, it might be you pay more money where you want to. Some people will do that, especially if it's like I'm building a school this year, right? So if I'm building a school, or I'm building the laboratories for the school, or I'm doing some sort of charity, and it goes over the amount, those that people don't care about because your intention was to do whatever charitable activity you want. But for your standard just yearly tax strategy, you're going to make sure that you lower that amount by about 20% and then get a refund on that first 10% that was paid in. You're going to pay less to the government, and your overall bill is going to be less. Make sense? So before you didn't have to do all that, but you couldn't help but give the government 10%. It was just guaranteed to go into the government coffers. So if you were one of those people who felt like the government mismanaged funds, there's nothing you can do about it. Now you actually can. No, it's not 30% on everything. It's 30% on most things. But the number one thing that isn't 30% that matters to our type of clients, or some of them anyway, is that dividends are 5%. Okay. So most of our trust clients have companies that are owned by the trust. Well, the company tax rate has always been 30%. So those companies have always been operating with the 30% on profits, okay? Not income, it's on profits. Okay, so 30% on profits has always been the thing. So because that 30, excuse me, because that 30% on profits is paid, then when it's distributed to the trust, there's a 5% withholding tax, and that is a final tax. So there's no way to minimize that, but it's only 5%, which is essentially what you kind of want to do with the withholding tax on the bonds. You want to give enough money away that they owe you half of that back. So you end up essentially paying 5% on the bonds. You're going to have to pay it anyway, right? So it's either you give it away to the government or you pay the people who take care of you. So make sure you take care of your trustee company. And then you lean into whatever charity. They have to be registered charities, right? So, if you're religious, your church, found some kind of arts foundation, science foundation, whatever, right? You can lean into that and offset it all. So you can, with the right plan, you can pay 5% all the time, right? Which you couldn't do before. So in a way, they shot themselves in the foot, because here's the thing. You're talking about people who have trust. So whether they know how to do it or not, they are at least smart enough to have professionals who do know how to do it. So you're you're effectively putting yourself in a worse situation. So it may just go back to the way that it was, because they're going to lose so much money. Because anybody who has a trust has, either a lawyer or a CPA that's going to be able to finagle, those payments and make sure that they get even less as a government than they were getting before through deductions. So it was a pretty dumb move, because they were guaranteed 10% previously. Now they're not. So they're probably going to see a 50% reduction in taxes paid coming from trust income. Politicians aren't always the smartest bunch. But for our clients, it's a big bonus. So that is how it's going to play out. However, It's another slice of the pie, right? So I told you guys, because it's going from tier 2 to tier 1, all of the gains, all of the wins are available now, right? Being able to win at the bond ladder, being able to get incredible ROI on incredibly safe investments, all of that stuff is only available because it's a tier 2 country on its way to tier 1. So as you can see, that's eroding slowly by slowly over time. That is eroding. So you want to get on your business now and stop playing. I know a lot of you like, I'm gonna do it next month. I'm gonna do it next month. You better get on it, because I'm gonna come on one day and I'm gonna announce that it's over for you. Which is the same thing that happened before. If you can follow me long enough, you know we used to do government contracting. And we use the government contracting to fund the generational wealth, and we did use the government contracting to fund the relocation. And then we used the prime contracting and subbed out all the work, and we're able to do the relocation and build out the generational wealth, right? Doge destroyed that. And a bunch of y'all was sitting there, hey, I'm going to do it tomorrow, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then here came Elon Musk and gutted the government contracting system, and y'all lost your opportunity. It's gone. And who knows if it'll ever come back. The next president might just ignore it. It ain't like he's going to come in and undo everything just because. There might be things that he wouldn't have touched, or that political party wouldn't have touched if it was up to them. But now that it's touched, why put it back? So a lot of y'all just lost that opportunity forever, right? So this is a shit or get off the pot moment, right? We're seeing the signs that they're about to shift into tier 1, and then all of their ROI is going to be adjusted down, similar to the US, where it's not magnificent returns on investment anymore and all that, and the opportunity again is going to close. Is that going to be you again? Are you going to be in the bar again talking about I could have got Google at $1? I could have got Apple at $1. I could have just one more day. I was just a day late. Again, really? I don't know. It's not my speed. Y'all better get on it while you can. You ain't got to use us, but get on it. Go find your way to get involved, and make sure that you capitalize before it's all over. We're thinking there's a year left. We're thinking as soon as the elections are done, that's it. Everything goes back to normal. Next year. Elections are next year. You got to remember, they didn't open any new bonds last year. They didn't release any new bonds. They were all reopens of old bonds. That's why every single bond that we bought our clients last year, it said 25-year maturity, but there's 21 and a half years left, right? Every single bond had that point in the maturity because it was a reopen. And they were still all over our target. So every single one was still over 10 years, right? And they were all over our S&P 500 target, which is the 10%. So everything was over 10%, everything was over 10 years. So all of those folks from last year have at least 10 years where they don't have to worry about nothing. Okay, which is the point. But they did not open a new bond for the entire year. Every single bond available was a reopen. There are signs, you know what I mean? When opportunities are sneaking away, there are signs. You don't have to just listen to I know sometimes it sounds like a salesman trying to blah, 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 blah. You don't have to listen to that nonsense. Look at the signs, right? See what's going on, and then see if the urgency is real, right? Because sometimes people will be on some BS and try to manufacture urgency. That's not the case. Look at the signs, see what's going on, go check if there were any new bonds issued last year, or if they were all reopens. And you'll see that 100% of them were reopens. They did. The Treasury of the country did not issue a single bond last year. All they did was reopen old ones with great interest rates. Why? So if they issue a new one, will it have a great interest rate? Or has that already died? And they're just not letting people see that because an election is coming up. Is there real urgency? Or is somebody just trying to salesman you, and FOMO you? There are signs. Do your research, figure it out, and get it done. Because you're going to be, crying in your soup when everything goes to 6% and you can't, capitalize on the situation anymore. And the folks that pulled the trigger got 20 years where they don't have to work. All right. So, do the research, make it happen, work with somebody. Again, you do not have to work with us, but, you definitely want to capitalize on this opportunity, especially if you're a relocatee person. Like if you're trying to relocate and you now have the opportunity to relocate and never work again, just relocate, quit your job, and you got money coming in every month and you don't have to work again. Are you kidding me? So, do your research and get on it. But yeah, we do believe that this is probably it. So we'll see. Hopefully we're wrong. This is one of those situations where we absolutely wish that we're wrong. We hope there's 10 more years of 16% ROI treasury bonds. But we highly doubt it. All right, highly doubt it. Personal account is up for those of you guys who typically ask for it. I only have a personal account on TikTok, so the guys on the other live streams, there's no personal account for you to follow. Right. Yeah. Oh, so okay, great. So you went and looked it up. Yeah. I mean, just look it up. It's not hard. This is the internet age, right? So last year there were no new bonds open. They were all reopened bonds with great interest rates. So essentially they reopened their best bonds ever instead of issuing a new best bond ever. All right. Already this year it's been the same thing. We've purchased 2 bonds for our new ladder clients this year. They've been great. The ROI is great, right? But they've both been reopens. So no new bonds last year. So far, no new bonds this year. Yeah, no. One was 19 years. The other one was 12. So still getting more than 10 years. Still way over 10%. I think one was 12%. The other one was 14. So still doing great on the return on investment. Still doing great on the runway, or the amount of time that you're going to get the payments, so that you don't have to worry about, money for a decade. Which is the point. Remember, we're Diaspora Freedom Initiative. The whole point of our company is to make sure that you have freedom and you don't have to worry about, things for as long as possible. So obviously, the whole point of this program is to make sure that you don't have to worry about money for at least 10 years, right? And you can go ahead and either relocate or set up your generational wealth. The generational wealth, for once, which I'm very happy to announce, actually, for once, generational wealth has outpaced relocation. So this is the first time in a decade and a half that people are setting up generational wealth trust funds. They're not necessarily relocating, but they're building wealth for the next generation. Incredibly important, right? And most folks, quite frankly, are just too selfish to do it. Plain and simple. Because to build generational wealth, the first generation takes a hit, and they do not benefit from building the generational wealth. It's generational wealth, right? Not personal wealth. So the first generation takes a hit, and they typically don't benefit. If they benefit, it's normally in old age. So if they live long enough, now the trust has kind of come to fruition. They're old. They need, old folks care, assisted living, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes the trust can kick in at that point, which is, half decent in and of itself. But typically, if you go back and look, first Kennedy died broke. First Rothschild died broke. First Rockefeller died broke. First Vanderbilt died broke. Cornelius was not the one who set it up. Cornelius was the son of the guy who made the moves to set it up, right? Typically, the first generation, at least back in those days, especially because things were a bit slower, right? Things are a little different now with our digital age, but typically, the first generation back then was the generation who was able to send the kid to school. So, like the Rothschilds, the founder couldn't read and he could barely count. Right? He was a cobbler. He fixed shoes, right? So he saved up enough money from the fixing of the shoes to send his son to school so he could read and write and count. And that's the one who started the banking empire, right? So you might look at him as the first one, but he only had that opportunity because of the one who sacrificed everything and died broke. And if you go back and you look at all the dynastic families, that's typically how it starts. There are exceptions because you can run a generational wealth plan and your personal wealth plan at the same time. They just shouldn't be the same thing, right? And so finally, people are quite frankly taking their head out of their backside and, actually stepping up and creating generational wealth for the first time in our entire history that it's outpaced relocation and outpaced business formation, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. We're committed to doing 100 new generational wealth families by the end of this year. We are at 12. So we're moving right along, but we are committed to doing 100 by the end of the year, for sure. It's the most impactful thing that can be done, right? It's the thing that makes the most change, period, amongst our people. And it's the thing that we do the least, especially as a people. So, got to get that worked out. Hey, how's it going?
Yes.
All is well?
Good.
Good. All right, so this opportunity, much like the government contracting opportunity, seems like it is slowly coming to an end. We don't expect that it'll just crash out from underneath us. And the reason for that is next year's an election year, right? The current administration doesn't need to be given its opposition any reason to blame it for destroying the economy or losing money or losing jobs or anything else, right? So we think you're good. Purely speculation, by the way, but we think you're good until at least the end of the election year. And then at the end of the election year, that might be it. They might then release a new bond, right, from the Treasury, and that bond will be at 7%, which is, it's okay, but it's not worth it for our planning purposes. That might still work if you're waterfalling a generational wealth trust, which is alive for a different day. If you're just compounding inside generational wealth and you're not spending any of it, it actually doesn't matter what the interest rate is. As long as you give it enough time, you'll be okay. So for those people, there is no rush other than it's going to take you longer. Like if you want to make sure that your generational wealth trust has, a significant amount of money in it in the next 15 to 20 years versus the next 60 years, then it matters. But if it's just I'm creating generational wealth, they'll get it when they get it. It doesn't matter, right? As long as it's compounding, it's either just going to take longer if it's a lower rate of return, or you're going to diversify out and try to make up for that lower rate of return in the future, utilizing the trust deed, which probably won't even be you. You'll probably be, dead and gone by then, and the trustees will be handling it. So if that's all you're doing is generational wealth, you're not doing relocation, you're not doing business ownership, there's not as much kind of like stress on you to act. But if you're trying to move here and not have to work anymore, there's a hell of a lot of stress on you because it can take 8 months just to get the bond ladder. Right? So from the day you start, it's not like you start and poof, you got it. No. There's only one auction, sometimes 2 auctions a month. Right? So you need 6 bonds in order to have monthly income. right? And there might be a month where neither one of those bonds hits the target, right? There might be a 9-year bond and a 6-year bond. You don't want either one of those. You want at least a 10-year, right? So now we skip that month. So it's not even just 6 months because of 6 bonds. It might take you 8, 10 months. And by then, now we're in the election cycle, right? And the bottom might fall out. So for those folks that are trying to relocate and not have to work no more, you need to move. For the folks that want to use it as a business runway, you need to move, right? So we have folks that, they pay their salaries for their employees from their businesses through the bond ladder. So profits just get tucked away or they get sent back to the US or whatever the case may be. Because yes, you can make enough profits that it actually pays for, your lifestyle in the United States, especially if you're in a place like Deani Beach, where transactions happen in dollars and not really shillings because it's a tourist location. So we have plenty of people. We got some folks that have Airbnbs right behind me. If those trees weren't there, you'd be able to see them. They're beautiful, and they do about $500 a night, right? And during peak season, which peak season is about 4 months long, their occupancy is damn near 100%, right? So they're doing, and they have 4 of them over there, right? So they're doing 75, 80,000 a year times 4. So they're doing 6 figures in US dollars in Africa because, they don't have their head up their butt thinking that there's no money here, right? So that's what it is. If you apply yourself, you can do that. We have plenty of people who are just investors and they actually live in the US and they end up not working in the US anymore because all their income is coming from here. So that's a possibility. Or if you are looking to relocate and just have a much easier life, then you need to move. So those are the 2 people who have urgency. If you're looking to do it as business, you need to move. If you're looking to relocate, you need to move. If you're just going to do generational wealth, take your time, right? Take your time. If you're just looking to do generational wealth, then it's not a big deal. All right. Still going to make better returns if you move quicker, but there's no risk that you will not make a return or that your generational wealth structure will be undone or anything like that, right? It's just going to move slower. Right. So if you were planning on doing generational wealth that your children could use, then move. If your generational wealth was already set up for your grandchildren, you'll be all right. Like whatever. You know what I mean? You'll be all right. Yeah, no, it's a function of the rate of return and the time that the money sits. So it's compounding, right? So if it's already set up for the grandchildren, let's say it was only compounding at 4%, but if it's 4% for 60 years, you know what I mean? You're still gonna have a decent little chunk of change in there by the end of the 60 years, right? Um, Now, currently, right now, the average that our generational wealth trusts are compounding at is 13.5%, right? So that's the average. We have some folks that got real lucky, like last year. Well, actually, now it's the year before last year. But in February of 2024, some folks got real lucky and went all in on IFB 1 2024 8.5, right, which is the name of the bond. You can go look it up. The interest rate on that bond was 18.4607%. That means every 4 years the money doubled, right? So they got super lucky on that and went all in on it. Like when they saw it, and the IFB bond is tax exempt, by the way. So they got a tax exempt, almost 20% return on investment guaranteed by the government of Kenya. So yeah, that means if they put $100,000 in there in 4 years, it's 200,000. And then 4 years after that, if they can reinvest back in, which you would have to use the secondary market to do, but it's possible. So if you could reinvest back in, then 4 years after that, the 400,000 is now 800,000, and then the bond closed it closes in 8.5 years. That's what the 8.5 at the end of the name is. That's how long the bond was open. Because the interest rate was so great, they wouldn't even leave it open, for 10 years, right? So you could literally, you could literally, put in, a significant amount of money, semi-significant amount of money, and it would double, right? So if you put in 200,000 in 4 years, it would be 400,000, and 4 years after that, it'd be 800,000. So you put $200,000 in, and less than a decade later, you have almost a million on a government bond. It's unheard of, right? Go look it up. Go see what the interest rate is. Go do the rule of 72. Figure out how long it takes to double that money, right? So these are the positions that people missing out. That's gone. Like the only way to get that is to go to the secondary market now and buy it from somebody. And who's going to sell it? Got to be somebody who has some kind of medical emergency or children emergency or something like that, who's willing to sell a bond like that on the secondary market. There's no guarantee you're going to go to the secondary market and find it, but that's completely closed unless they reopen it. But that's completely closed down, right? So that's what happens when it comes to being able to build wealth. If you don't have an ad hoc preparation fund, you're pretty much screwed. You might get lucky, once or twice, but if you don't have ad hoc funds to go ahead and take advantage of opportunities as they arrive, you're done. You're done. A matter of fact, some of you guys have firsthand experience with that. When we announced our end of year special last year, a whole bunch of people were like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna come back next Friday," and gone. 3 days, whole thing was sold out, right? Because the folks that had the ad hoc funds was like, "Wait a minute, you're gonna build me a house, you're gonna take care of my immigration, you're going to give me a bond ladder so that I never have to work again. You're gonna, take care of all of that." All my legal compliance, convert my driver's license, take care of everything, and build me a house by the beach. I'm on it. People were pulling money out 401ks, right, and getting it done. And then there were people like, yeah, let me wait for the check. I'll wait 2 weeks till Friday. 3 days gone. We had to go buy another acre of land, and now there's only one left, right? So that's what happens if you don't have ad hoc funds in order to execute on things like that. You just miss them, right? So that's what people who are serious about generational wealth are doing. And then some people are like, well, I'll never have ad hoc funds, right? I'm paycheck to paycheck. I'll just never be there. That's what the first generation of generational wealth does. That's why the first generation always dies broke. That's the way it works, right? Now we're in the digital age. We understand compounding a little bit better. We understand, some things a little bit better. So we get to see some first generation folks that like 15 years down the road, that generational wealth actually starts, helping them. So, there's that. But I wouldn't bank on that. I would bank on planting a tree, the shade of which you might never sit in. All right. All right. Candace, what's going on? What stream is that? You guys on Facebook. You guys on Facebook, you can follow Candizi there. Has a lot of great information on her pages. TikTok. Another Candy. All right. So wasn't talking about you that time. I'm from Kenya. Hope one day we'll be there. Okay, so you're from Kenya, but you're living in the diaspora? Nothing wrong with that. Shadrach on YouTube. Okay. Oh yeah. So yes, but that's primarily the trustee company that does that stuff. So yeah, we do have a program where we can get your kids over here and get them to school and get them into, some of the best international schools out here and like take care of them. Very kind of luxury white glove type of situation. But there's plenty of people that don't want their kids involved in school shootings and don't want their kids pulled over by the police and God forbid what happens next. So it's just better for them to send their kids here for boarding school rather than let their kids be in a place where they could lose their lives over nothing. And so yeah, we handle the trust formation and then we turn that over to the trustee company. So the trustee company actually handles all that. So that's not really, because these are business pages and this business doesn't do that part of what you're talking about. It's not really something for me to talk about here per se, other than to say that like yes, we set up the legal structure under which that takes place and then we hand it over to that team to actually do it. Yeah, just direct. That's just DM me and I'll send you like the link uh, over to the trustee company and all that. You happen to be on one of the streams where I can't like talk. So I can't like type something in the chat and send it to you. If you're on TikTok, I just put it in the chat. But oh well, that depends. You can adjust how much money you get per month off of the bond ladder, obviously by buying more bonds, right? So our base is 50,000 a month in local currency, which as long as you own a house here, you're good. If you don't own a house here, then that might not be enough. But then we've had like families that like we just did a what was it, a 12-person family, and they needed like way more than that, right? And so they just bought more bonds, to do that. So yeah. Yeah. No, this is the first year that generational wealth clients have outpaced immigration clients, which is interesting. But I'm super happy about it because generational wealth makes the biggest impact on the community overall. So I'm happy that people are finally kind of taking their heads out of their butts and getting the generational wealth done. Because it's typically a matter of greed, right? It's typically a matter of, you know, they are not down for the sacrifices that come with creating generational wealth and not benefiting from it. We even had, man, and this is a conversation I'll never freaking forget. This is way back when I very first started. But I remember, I remember a pregnant mother. Her name was Wendy. I will never forget this person. I remember her saying that she didn't want her unborn child to have anything better than her. That was her mentality as a pregnant mother. Right? It was crazy. But I will always remember that conversation because it's the conversation that woke me up to the fact that like some people don't give a fuck. Forgive my French, right? But I'm just gonna keep it real with you. Some people just don't give a fuck. Those are the same people that kick their kids out of the house at 18. You don't care about generational wealth at all. You don't love your family. You don't love your kids. The same people that choose, the man who's sneaking into your kids' bedroom over the kids and blaming them for what happened. The same people who shouldn't be parents, who shouldn't have kids at all. Those are the same ones that will never ever create generational wealth. Period. I'm gonna put it where the goat can get it. I don't care what anybody feels about it. That's what it is. Right? They don't give a fuck. It is what it is. Right? So it is. I am delighted to see that we have a significant uptick in generational wealth to the point where it's actually surpassed relocation and investments at this point. Now, obviously, generational wealth, as far as the compounding aspect, is investing, but it's not investing for oneself, right? And it's even the same, like the same people who talk the bullshit about capitalism being evil and they're the same ones that won't sacrifice and not capitalize to make sure that their kids are good. The same ones. It's just a bunch of lazy bullshit and a bunch of excuses. That's really all it breaks down to because you can literally build generational wealth with $1. You can compound $1. It's going to take you 100, 200 years, but you can literally compound $1 and make generational wealth. It doesn't matter what amount you start with. What matters is that it's compounding over time, uninterrupted, period. That's all that matters. So the money part is so ridiculously easy that for people to not be doing it, it's a travesty. Now, the hard part is actually the education. The money doesn't matter anywhere near as much as the education, but people aren't even doing the easy part. So there's that. Candace is down there. Facts. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, sometimes it just got to be said the way it needs to be said. You know what I mean? I don't have time for the nonsense, especially when it comes to like babies. You know what I mean? They're literally babies who didn't ask to be here. You forced them to be here, and now you ain't even got enough damn common sense to give them a decent life. Yeah, no, it's absurdly easy. The money is absurdly easy, right? It's just compounding. So you just gotta. It's what Warren Buffett does. You just gotta park the money and leave it there, right? That's it. You don't even have to make additional payments to it. It just takes longer if you don't, right? But you just park the money and leave it there. That part is super duper easy. Here's the issue though. Statistically, 70% of generational wealth families lose it in the second generation. And it's because all they do is the easy part. It's because all they do is the money. So they'll build a generation of wealth without any education. That's why we use the trust fund, so that the trustees can educate the heirs, the beneficiaries, right? Because how are you going to educate them? You don't even know what the education is. You can't teach them something you don't know, right? So the trustee company, which is typically a law firm full of lawyers, they're going to hire educators to come in and do that education to make sure that you get past that second generation, right? And so that's really, quite frankly, the hard part. Then in that second generation, they have to, it's better if it happens in the first generation, quite frankly, but they then have to implement something called habitus, right? So they have to implement habitus, which again is the hard part, and they have to transmit that habitus as cultural capital, right? Sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, right? But that's what creates stewardship. And if you have no idea what any of those things are, you're already behind and got to catch up, right? So you got to go check out French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu and look at his work in generational wealth and so on and so forth. But these are the things that create real generational wealth, and these are the things that have been established. This is all sociology, some psychology, but mostly sociology, and people who have done lifetimes worth of research. Right, Pierre Bourdieu is just one of them. He's probably the best in my opinion, but he's just one of at least 12 people who did groundbreaking research in this subject matter and know exactly how to do it, right? It's not a mystery to people who really want to get it done. The handbooks and the manuals are out there. You just got to read, right, and get it done. So that becomes the hard part. We rather sit up there and argue about nonsense for hours on end in social media lives than read and learn something like that would impact our future generations for decades and decades and centuries even. So it's a matter of priorities. Oh, absolutely, Tammy. Yeah, absolutely. The amount of so-called intellectuals that I see arguing about Indians and nonsense for 16 hours a day on TikTok when they could be out in the street actually benefiting the community and doing something in real life is absurd. is absurd. It's actually the most anti-intellectual thing I've ever seen. You got to be an idiot to waste 16 hours a day on a social media app with a bunch of people that might be bots, might not even be real, arguing about you know who's an ether and a Indian and a whatever, like it affects your bank account, and doing nothing for your community at all while calling yourself doctor or intellectual this or intellectual that. The idiocy, of the community is amazing. Yeah, I don't pull too many punches. You know what though? That comes from being in a position of, if you got a bond ladder rolling, right? And you know that you have guaranteed income for the next 10 years. If you have another bond ladder rolling for your company, and you know your company has guaranteed income for the next 10 years, if you're using the opportunities in front of you, it's a little bit different. You don't necessarily care, about being politically correct about anything, because can't nobody cancel you. You're good either way. You don't have to make a sale. You don't have to do business. You're good either way. So you're going to call it the way it is and keep it moving, right? That's the freedom that comes with, making the right decisions around money, quite frankly. I mean, if you go back, and again, you guys could do your own research and look it up. If you go back, you look at IFB 1 2024, 8.5. That's the name of the bond. You're talking about getting almost 20% a year. Now, think about that for just a second. Let's just use some critical freaking thinking, right? You're getting 18.46% every year, guaranteed by a sovereign government. How much does it cost to pull your money out of your 401k? What's the penalty? Is it more than 18.46%? Is it 10%? If you're making 18.46%, can you pay that for free? Do you still got excuses? So it's all about whether or not you got the will to make it happen. If you got the will to make it happen, the way presents itself quite easily. It's just math. If you don't have the will to make it happen, then you're screwed. Yep, not magic, just math. Compounding is just math. What does the rule of 72 say about 18.46%? How long does it take for that money to double? Do you know what the rule of 72 is? Y'all better be Googling. Y'all better be looking it up. Don't take my word for it. How long would it take for any amount of money? Doesn't matter what the amount is. What matters is the rate. So how long does it take at 18.46% for money to double under the rule of 72? How long does it take? So if your 401k was stuck in there, how long does it take for the 401k to double? You tell me. Do the math. Right? Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, Tony. Absolutely. The Ravens. Yeah. Totally. Totally. It's just the mindset, man. It's just the mindset. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's why I don't try to pull people out of mindset. right? People are going to grow out of their mindset when they grow out of their mindset, because their mindset, it's a hodgepodge of different things. It's not just your thinking; it's also your physicality. It's also your environment. So it's not like I'm going to tell you something and your mindset's going to change. That's not the way that's going to work. So I'm not going to waste a whole bunch of time trying to adjust anybody's mindset. You know what I mean? The education will be there. They educate themselves. They move forward. It's going to take them however long it takes them, and ain't nothing I can do about it going to get them out of that. Right? It's like addiction. Ain't nothing you can say to an addict that's going to get them out of their addiction until they hit rock bottom. You can try. You can do all the talking in the world. Till you're blue in the face. They got to get there on their own, right? People, places, and things, right? They got to change their environment. They got to upgrade their thinking. All of that. It's the same thing. Same thing, right? So once the mindset's right, you see the solutions in everything. Absolutely everything, right? When the mindset's wrong, you see the excuses in everything, right? When the tariffs started, we had people that showed up talking about they're now going to compete with China because the tariffs at 140% with China, and AGOA was still in effect, so there was a 0% tariff on anything made in Africa, in an AGOA country, which Kenya is an AGOA country. Talk about people that made millions in months because they could finally beat Chinese pricing for 2 or 3 months, and in those 2 or 3 months made millions because they saw a solution with Trump's bullshit instead of something to complain about for 16 hours on a TikTok live. It's the mindset. It's the mindset. Right? So if the mindset is trained, you will see solutions everywhere. If it's not, you'll see excuses everywhere. There's people watching right now talking about but. The excuses are coming out already. Racism. My mama. My daddy didn't love me. I didn't have a daddy. The excuses are already flowing. There's people in FYP. The excuses are already coming. It's all about mindset. And get those people away from you, because it is infectious. Until your mindset has been fortified by environmental proof, it's infectious. Now once you have environmental proof, then you're fortified, right? So nobody can. It doesn't work anymore, right? Because like the people who will throw me an excuse don't have the life I have, and I don't want their life. Right? So at that point, they can't infect me anymore. I've been fortified by environmental proof, right? But until you're fortified by environmental proof, those people, they can infect you with negativity, almost like a disease, right? So keep those people the hell away from you until you got some environmental proof in your life, for sure. It depends on you. Your proof is going to be based on whatever you consider to be success. So what you consider to be success, I might consider to be failure. You know what I mean? What I consider to be failure, you might consider to be success. So it's just going to be completely up to you. I didn't say anything about money. You did. And maybe you need to figure out why I said success and you thought money. See how you'll expose yourselves? Immediately had an excuse. Capitalism excuse. I didn't say nothing about money. See what's wrong with your mindset? You expose yourself. You're the one focused on money. I didn't say nothing about money. I said success. What's success if it's not? Well, for you, maybe money is success. Like I said, it's going to change for each person. So what's success if it's not money? If that's your question, then for you, maybe that's what it is. I have a beautiful wife. I have a brand new son. My son will never be harassed by police. My son will never be pulled over and shot because of his cell phone was mistaken for a gun. You know what I mean? I never have to deal with any of that. That's success to me. Now, if you think, a couple $100 is success, then power to you. Go find your couple $100. The piece of my life is my success. Yeah, no, I hear you 100%. Yeah, I mean, if money is your success, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't change my life. More power to you. Go do your thing. It's just like I said, my success might be your failure. Your failure might be my success. It's going to depend on you. I'm not saying anybody's wrong or right. It's going to depend on you. Now, where you might be wrong is with yourself. If your mindset doesn't assist you in achieving your own goals, that's the definition of wrong. Not because I got a way and my way is different than yours, so I'm right and you're wrong. No. If you say you want X, Y, and Z, and your mindset only gets you to A, B, and C, you're wrong with yourself. Right? You're the one who's going to dictate whether your mindset is right or wrong based on whether or not it's getting you to your goal, whether or not your outcomes are proving that your mindset is right or wrong. And that's for you, right? That's for you to decide and for you to figure out. New to your channel, what is the topic? Right now it's probably generational wealth. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're going to dictate. You're going to dictate all of those things. You let other people dictate, you're always going to lose because you can't win in somebody else's game, right? So if you let other people dictate, what is successful and what is not successful and what you need to do and what you don't need to do, you'll lose every single time because you don't even understand the core motivation behind, what it is you're doing. They understand the core motivation because it's their motivation, right? That's why you don't compete with people. Right? You play your game, you execute, whatever it is that you want to do, and you go from there. And that's it. That's one of the beautiful things about, like, when we're doing generational wealth trusts, a lot of times what we start with is a family constitution. And so that's one of the beautiful things about the family constitution is it actually allows you to sit down and figure out what your family is about. Sometimes with the assistance of said family, sometimes you're the first generation. You're the one that's creating everything. So there ain't nobody else but you. And everybody who comes after you will now have your playbook, right? And the generational wealth that you sent down to them in order to execute. But knowing what the goals are, knowing where you're going, allows you to skip the existential crisis part of development, right? So that why am I here? Why was I even born? What is my purpose in life? Right? That moment is skipped when you have a family constitution that clearly outlines all of those things for you. So you look at the family constitution. Okay, I'm part of the Rockefeller family. This is what we do. This is our purpose. This is all of that's cleared up for you. Now you can get on with developing yourself, figuring out who you are within that framework, right? And that's one of the things. The framework has to be loose enough that you're not actually telling somebody like, oh, well, what we do in this family is everybody's a neurosurgeon. What? What if I want to be a poet? You know what I mean? So it can't be that, but there has to be a moral framework, kind of what religion does, right? You can be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, and all be in the same religion, but there's some kind of moral framework that religion has created, that lets everybody know, like, this is how we move forward. These are the things that we don't lie, we don't steal, we don't cheat, whatever the case may be. There's that framework there, and there's enough wiggle room inside for everybody to be what they want to be within the framework. That's how family constitutions have to be set up, right? A little bit tighter even than religion, right? but with enough wriggle room within the framework that everybody can be what they want to be within the family and still push the family in a single direction, right? And so that becomes, almost part of the hard part of generational wealth, because that becomes part of the stewardship, part of the education building. It becomes part of the most impactful side of generational wealth, not the easy side, which is always going to be money. Money is just compound. Money just needs a compound. As long as the money is sitting there and nobody's touching it, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as long as it's compounding. That's not a difficult thing to do. Having the education to understand what to do with that money and how to have stewardship over the family assets, that becomes the hard part. And then having some sort of morality so that, you don't lose whatever's in the generational wealth via corruption, essentially. Those things are the harder part. And that's why the trust makes that a little bit more easy, because the trustee is going to protect them from themselves, right? That's why there's almost 100% chance that when generational wealth is passed down in a will, it's automatically gone. It's almost the same thing as winning the lottery. Within 3-4 years, lottery winners are broke. They're typically in a worse position than they were before they started, because now they had enough money to get like serious debt, right? You won $100 million. Can you get a $10 million, dollar mortgage, for some mansion that you don't need? Yup. Can you get a $20 million loan for a yacht that you don't need, and you got $100 million in that same bank? Yup. Right. 4 years later, you're broke and got, $500,000 a month yacht payments and, mortgages that are crazy and astronomical and all this. So typically they're worse off than when they started. Yeah, same thing. Same thing. You gotta, the education has to be there, right? Some of them even, end up broke trying to do the right thing. Because guess what? If you weren't a good investor before you won the lottery, winning the lottery didn't magically make you one. You're still a bad investor. Right? So if you didn't know how to invest before you won the lottery, you still don't know how to invest after you won the lottery. So some of them go broke doing, things that they think are smart, and it just doesn't work out. Where do I live? I live in Diani Beach, Kenya. Candy says, big facts. Paul Kamau. Paul Kamau is a expert engineer. So you guys, what live stream is that? That's Facebook. You guys on the Facebook live stream, you follow Paul Kamau. Paul Kamau can take an entire car apart and put it back together, make it better than it was before. He's an expert automotive engineer. He can do anything with a car. So you guys follow Paul Kamau over there. Serious dude. If you're on the Facebook live stream, you cannot see him on YouTube. You can't see him on TikTok. Can't see him on Fanbase. So only if you are on the Facebook live stream, you should see Paul Kamau's name down there. Go ahead, give him a follow. Yeah, I like it, Scepter. Yeah, man. You're most welcome. Wait, put up. So you're okay. Yeah. So the thing is that there have been some law changes, and there's been some activity that we've seen from the Kenyan central bank that lead us to believe that if you are still trying to do a bond ladder, if you're trying to relocate here and use a bond ladder to give you monthly income so that you don't have to work again for the next 10 years of your life, now is the time to do that. Okay. If you want extremely high compounding in your generational wealth trust fund, now is the time to do that. Last year, the central bank did not release any new bonds at all. They reopened old bonds. Now, next year is an election year. This year, they haven't released any new bonds yet either. They've reopened old bonds. Now, granted, those old bonds have incredible interest rates on them. But They have not released new bonds. Kenya is a tier two country, is approaching a tier one country. All right. Kenya has a nuclear power plant being built somewhere up near Lake Naivasha. Currently, they're building a brand new international airport. The old one wasn't that bad, but they're upgrading and all of that. So they're going tier two to tier one, right? And so the money to do that comes from all different sources, but sovereign debt is one of them, which is treasury bonds, right? So they've been reopening old sovereign debt, and they have not released any new ones. So you have to ask yourself why, right? There's an election coming up, so it wouldn't make sense to all of a sudden open a new bond at 7% when last year's bonds were at 13, 14, 15, all the way up to 18% ROI, right? Wouldn't make the current administration look very good if they did that. So they keep reopening the old bonds with the incredible, ROI percentages. But after that election, the next bond that they open might be 4%, like an American bond. American bonds, you'd be lucky to get 7%, right? So now is the time. It takes a minimum of 6 months to build a bond ladder. So if you're on board to build a bond ladder now, you got 6 months before you can finish that bond ladder. So now's the time. A lot of you guys be waiting and waiting and waiting. A lot of you guys, you got messed up in the end of year special by waiting, but you waited too long. 3 days after we announced it, it was sold out. So go check the facts. Go see what's going on. Go see if they opened any new bonds last year. See if they opened any new bonds this year. See when the election is. Go do your own research. But you're running out of time to be able to set yourself up in such a way that you don't have to work for the next 10 years. Right? Now, if that doesn't matter to you, then cool. If it does, then you need to move. All right? Put yourself in a good way. But it's up to you, actually. You shouldn't have to work again ever. But that depends on what you do over the 10 years that you don't have to work. If you spend all 10 years at the beach, then maybe you're going to have a problem in 11 years. But you should be setting yourself up in such a way that now passive income is your normal. Bonds are not stocks. At the end of bond maturity, you get your money back. Yes, yes, yes. You may not qualify, right? So we don't just take people money and set them up for failure, right? If you don't qualify, we will not accept you as a client. So you can head over to our website. The website is in the bio. These are all business accounts that we're live on. Website is in the bio. You can head over to the website and take the assessment. If the assessment says you don't qualify, but you weren't really, answering the questions on the up and up, one of our legal team will probably reach out to you and just explain why you didn't qualify and kind of confirm it. If your assessment looks like nonsense, like somebody did like a John Doe assessment the other day, we're not going to send you an email. Right? So if your assessment looks like nonsense, then we're not going to reach out to you. We don't have time for it. But you go through your assessment, it'll just let you know like what you qualify for, what you need to do to qualify, if you need to work on something, what you need to work on. One of our experts will get in touch with you and just kind of go over stuff with you. Even if you don't qualify, we'll try to give you some value in moving forward, and then you go out there and start building your life if you have the will to do it. If you do qualify, then we can talk about whether or not we're the right firm for you and you're the right client for us. Because just because you qualify doesn't mean that we need to be servicing you, and maybe our vibe doesn't work for you either. So we get that worked out, and then as long as that's jiving, then we can move forward. So that's how that works. All right. Any other questions on generational wealth? Any other questions on the bond ladder? Any other questions on the taxation changes? How that that affects your trust, how that affects your bond ladder. No, maybe you might be bond laddering in America. That's a maturity ladder. That's not what we're doing. We're doing a coupon ladder. So it's an ROI ladder. It's not a bond. It's not. I got a bond that matures every year. It's not that. You can do that with a CD, and that's not. You know, that's just when you have a bunch of extra money sitting around. And you don't know what to do with it. You go get 6% and stack it so it matures. You know, every month or every year or whatever. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about coupon laddering, not maturity laddering. Currently, yeah, because the Kenyan central bank has such amazing interest rates right now, right? So, because the Kenyan central bank has the amazing interest rates that it has currently, and because of the perfect storm of Kenya's cost of living outside of Nairobi, we're able to do a bond ladder and place somebody at the beach in like Diani, and like they never have to work again in their life. Like that bond ladder just pay them every month enough money that they're just good, right? So definitely for at least 10 years they would be paid out where everything is covered, you know, by passive income for at least those 10 years. And then of course if they make good decisions, you know, with the overflow across those 10 years, they should be able to set themselves up for you know, longer. So that doesn't, like, there are even countries that have higher ROI built into their bonds, but maybe you can't buy them directly. So now there's a brokerage fee in the middle. Or the cost of living in those places are so high that the interest rates on the bond are canceled out, right? So it has to be a perfect storm for our relocation clients that when they get the bond ladder, there's actually enough money coming out of the bond ladder that they don't have to work again. You know what I mean? If they don't want to. Most, I'd say about 80% of our people still have something going on. A lot of them lean into whatever their passion was, right? So we have a guy who did a bond ladder and he did our one of our specials. So he got a house with it and all of that, right? So he has a house, a car, everything, bond ladder, blah, 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 blah. So his house came with an office. And, you know, he was like, all right, I want the office to be like a sound studio. And he got into voice acting. And in America, like, he couldn't do that. Like, he had to make his payments. He had to, you know, whatever. Here, he doesn't have to worry about money anymore, right? He's getting a check from the government every month. Well, it's a direct deposit, but he gets money from the government every month. He lives off of that money, you know, and he doesn't have to worry about working. So now he was able to lean into the voice acting, and he actually makes more on the voice acting now than he's actually getting from the government. And that was within like 6, 7 months. But just 6, 7 months of like not having to care about money and getting that monkey off your back allowed him to really go after his dreams like that. So most people, they got something else that they're doing. Any many. Well, yeah. If you don't want to have to work anymore, then yes, there's a minimum amount. If you're just doing a bond ladder to have, you know, passive income coming in for the next 10 years to like help out, then the minimum that it costs to get a bond in Kenya is 50,000 local currency, which is like $386, like $400. Just call it $400, right? So that's the minimum that it costs to get into a bond. If you want to live off of that bond, then it's going to be closer to like 75,000. Now that 75,000 also includes immigration, right? But typically, what can jack you up is rent, right? Rent can jack people up. So most of our clients, what they do is they'll do somewhere in the neighborhood of like 185,000, and we'll build them a brand new house, right? So we'll build them a brand new house. We'll take care of all the legalities. You know, we're vertically integrated. So we have our own law firm. We have our own architecture firm. We have our own general contractor vertically integrated within our firm. And so we'll build an entire house, buy them land, set up a trust fund, all the things, right? And then when we set up a house, we typically set it up on what's considered to be agricultural land, right? And so because of that, there's no taxes. So they have no taxes. They have no water bill. They have no sewer bill. because they have a biodigester, for the sewer stuff. They have their own well for the water stuff. They can upgrade and set up, you know, solar power and all that, so they have no electric bill. So now they're like billless in their house. They own their own house. They own their own land. They're getting, money every month from the government, and they have no overhead, zero overhead, right? So that's typically how they do that. Yeah, U.S. dollars, U.S. dollars. Yep, U.S. dollars gets them everything. So again, there's like, while the subprime, not subprime mortgage crisis, sorry, while the BlackRock crisis was going on and people couldn't buy like single family houses, but they had saved up their down payments and all of that, a lot of those guys just came over here, just used their down payment to get in over here, and like now they don't have to worry about anything. So we saw a lot of that, but because of the incredible interest rates, we also see a lot of people pulling money out of retirement accounts because the penalty is 10%. If there's a penalty, the penalty is 10%. So if you're getting 16% on the bond over here and the penalty is 10%, which doesn't have to be paid until your next, tax filing, then a lot of people are like, oh, I'll pull it out of there, throw it in here, make 16%, pay the 10%, have 6% left over. You know what I mean? And I'm good to go. So a lot of folks were just like, it doesn't even make sense for me to be concerned about the penalty. Let me just go ahead and, and pull that out and get a better deal. I came in on the minimum amount for a bond. Hey, what's going on now, problem? So what do you need? What do you want to know? Did you not hear what the minimum amount was, or what are you asking me, brother? And good to see you, by the way. Oh, so yeah. So it depends. If you want to live off the bond, right? So like if you want to do a bond ladder where you don't have to worry about money for the next 10 years, period. You want to relax, enjoy your life, da 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 da. Then you're looking at, you want to, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 grand, right? To get a bond that's paying out that much. Because what's paid out is obviously dependent on what you put in, right? So if you get 13.5% ROI for the next 20 years on this bond, and remember 10 years is our minimum. Most of our people actually get more than that, right? So here, let me actually show you our end of year report for our clients from last year, and you'll actually see the actual money that they actually put in their pocket off of their bond ladder. Let me grab that. See if I can show you guys that. This looks like it. Is this it? Okay, sorry for you guys on the other streams. I can't show you guys. TikTok has a function where I can put up like a picture and show everybody. So if you guys are on one of the other streams, just follow along with what I'm saying. So this was the end of year report for the folks that had the bond ladders. These people are, well, they're not all living off their bond ladders, but these bond ladders are livable, right? So January was the lowest bond that they had. It was the SDB 1 2011 30-year bond, right? And so it looks like that one was 12%. So 60,000 was the gross payout. There was the withholding tax of 6,000. They got 54,000 deposited in their bank account. Then the next month, it was that IFB bond. Actually, that's the big boy that we were just talking about. So there's IFB 1 2024 8.5, right? Same amount of money, by the way, in both of these bonds. So because the IFB bond is 18.46% ROI and the one before it was only 12% ROI, instead of getting 60,000, they got 92,303.50. Exact same amount of money, right? And then an IFB bond is tax exempt. So that's why you see there the tax deduction is zero. So they got 92,000 dropped into their account that month. The next month there was an FXD. I think that's a 14% bond. So again, each one of these bonds has exactly the same amount of money in it, right? So that bond paid out 80,000. There was a 10% withholding tax. So they withheld 8,000. They got 72,000 dropped into their bank account. In April, there was another fixed deposit bond. That has to be like a 0.5 or something. So like maybe it's 13.5 or something like that is the interest rate. So they got 69,710. The 10% withholding withheld 6,971. So they got 62,739 dropped into their bank account. In May, the gross payout was 67,000. They withheld 6,700 for the withholding tax. So 60,300 got into their account. And then in June was another infrastructure bond, which with a lower interest rate. So they got 66,075 as their gross because it's an infrastructure bond. It's zero interest. So they got the 6675 dropped into their bank account. Now in July, you see it just restarts. That's why it's 6 bonds to get paid all year, not 12. Bonds in this country pay out every 6 months, 2 payments a year. So it's 6 bonds. If you strategically get those bonds where their payout dates are different months, then you set yourself up where you're getting a payment every single month. So at the end of the year there, in their bank account, they did 814,000. Can't see the last number because there's an invite box here. What was it 835? 814,835 for the year, right? So they that's what covered them for the year, right? So that's what a bond ladder looks like. Sometimes people will get multiple ladders, right? So it depends on your pocket, obviously, right? A second ladder doesn't cost the same as a first ladder because you don't have to pay all the setup fees and stuff again, right? You don't have to pay for another trust, and you don't have to pay the immigration fees and KRA pins and all that, right? So there's setup that goes into the first one that doesn't have to go into the next one. So the ladders that you get, the ladders that you get after the first one are cheaper than the first one is. So we have some folks that have like 6, 7 ladders because they just do so well that they've pulled out of everything else and they've gone damn near all in on bond ladders. So they'll have like a company, for example, and the company, needs to pay, payroll. And so they'll get a bond ladder that actually covers the payroll on the company, right? So that they're not getting phone calls from America like, oh, it's payroll today, or a pipe broke, or the roof is leaking, or the bond ladder is making monthly payments into an account, and anything that goes wrong with the property gets paid out of that account. And because it's property maintenance, it's tax deductible, right? So every time you maintain the property, you can, deduct that from your tax bill, right? So there's people who run those, right? Then there's folks who Candy, it's good. Then there's folks who pump it into generational wealth. If you're pumping money monthly into generational wealth, the compounding compounds, right? So you increase the compounding effect, right? So now a generational wealth trust that might have took 60 years to compound to any real money, now it's compounding in 15 years because you got this money getting pumped into it every month, right? So some people do that. Other people straight up live off of it. They're like, you know what? Super tired of being in the United States. Super tired of what's going on right now. Tired of being pulled over by ICE. I'm going to go move to Deanny Beach. And when I get there, I'm not going to have to work for 10 years because I got this bond in place. So I'm just going to move there. They're going to build me a house. I'm going to move into my brand new house. And I'm going to get checks from the government every single month for the next 10 years. And I have to do nothing. Right? And then it's a bond. So at the end of the maturity of the bond, you get all your money back. Whatever money you put into it comes right back to you at the end. Right? So your money's coming back to you regardless. So it's a pretty sweet deal for the people who are savvy enough to do it. Everybody says the same thing. They all pop up and they're like, this is a no-brainer. So everybody says the same thing. The problem is the interest rates are the way they are because it's a tier 2 country. So it's at the end of being a developing country and it's about to be developed, right? And so that's why the interest rates are the way they are, because the government needs that money to finish the development, right? They're building a nuclear power plant, like I said, right now. They're going to need money to finish that. They're building a brand new international airport. They need the money to finish that. So that's why interest rates are where they are, to incentivize investors, of course. That's going to end. That's not sustainable. It's not going to be that way forever. So the folks that are sleeping, you're just gonna miss it. It just is what it is. Yeah, man. This is our wheelhouse problem charm. Now you know why Kia likes us so much. For additional ones, right. For additional ones without the setup fee and all of that. Now, if you already have immigration, then it's going to be about 65. But if you've already got a ladder with us, you've already done your setup and all of that. You don't have to pay brokers fees and all of that stuff again. So for additional ones at the same rate, yes, it would be 55. Your additional ones don't have to be at the same rate though, right? So it's all completely flexible. Like you might be like, you know what? I only need 25,000 more. Well, then that's half, right? So now you're talking about, whatever, 27 instead of 55, right? So as you customize it, you can, that number can be adjusted. Yeah. We've had some people with like really, really big families and like flew over here with 5 dogs, 3 cats, 12 people. And so they needed like 750,000 a month. You know what I mean? So then their number was astronomical, but it wasn't to them because they had pooled their resources as a family, right? So you had 12 professionals that all wanted to do it together, get 5 acres. Everybody has their own house and, all that stuff. So, that's a different, setup. But the point is we can do anything, right? So it can be as expensive or as affordable as need be. For some folks that, especially on the generational wealth side, we could do each one at what? If it's just generational wealth and that's all you care about, what would it be? It would be 36. So we could do it on the generational wealth side at like $3,600. You know what I mean? So $3,600, like a tax return, right? So like if it's not to be lived off of, and you're setting up something for the next generation, that can be done way easier. You know what I mean? So it just depends on what it is the person's doing. But if you think about it, if you don't have to work for another day, and you're like, well, for the next 10 years, let me stay to my base. If you don't have to work for the next 10 years, and you get your money back at the end, right? Because the bond's going to pay your money back. Obviously, less your broker's fees and all that. So your money back is going to be closer to what you put in the chat, right? But your bond's going to pay you your money back at the end. Then, right, like that. Obviously, you can't do that for 10 grand. You know what I mean? So it just depends on what it is that you're looking for, and then what that costs for that level of freedom, essentially. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no problem, no problem. Ain't nothing wrong with that, brother. Yeah, let me know, man. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Sometimes it's even, I mean, it depends on your greater plan. Let me know. Let me know. Reach out to me. I know you talk to Kia as well, so definitely whatever she has cooking up for you or whatever. But yeah, there are hybrids. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't have to get a full bond ladder, but then you need to keep some income from, so you know what I mean? You can hybrid stuff out where you make it a softer landing for you and you're in a good position, but maybe you don't have the full freedom of like, I don't have to worry about money for the next 10 years. But before this thing disappears, there are definitely ways to take advantage of it and like hybrid things out, and then as you move forward, there's always a secondary market. The problem is you can't guarantee nothing on the secondary market. Secondary bond market means people need to cash out their bond early and they're willing to essentially lose money to do so, right? So you could potentially go to the secondary market and pick up an old bond that someone else is looking to sell and like finish your ladder, right? So there is the potential for that. So some people are like, you know what, I'm gonna get in now where I fit in. I'll still be in a position where now I can still kind of jump off the cliff and move, and then I'll finish the rest once I get there. So I hear you. I hear you. Well, here's the thing. Here's what I was in your same kind of mindset, right? Where I just kept saving, saving, saving. Here's the thing. If you're saving, you're losing money. You once you see that, and it took a little while. So earlier I had said something to the effect of like, I can't educate nobody out of their mindset, right? People had given me the education. You're losing money to inflation. You're losing money to inflation. All you're doing is saving. You're losing money for years, and it just didn't click. They tried to lead the horse to water, but they couldn't make me drink. Once that clicks, once you take a look at it and you see what's going on and you realize you're literally throwing your money away by just saving, you should have an emergency fund, right? That's exactly what it's for, an emergency fund. So, okay, fine. You got your 6 months, whatever it is you need, and it's in savings, and maybe it's high yield savings, so you're not throwing as much of it away, but whatever. It's there for liquidity in an emergency. Fine. Beyond that, you are throwing money away to inflation. If it's not working for you, it's getting smaller. And even though the dollar amount's not getting smaller, the buying power is. Right now is one of the easiest ways to see that because of the way this administration got that American grocery store looking. So right now you can walk into an Aldi's right, with $100 and come out with 6 things at the Aldi's, right? You go into a Walmart or a Target with $100, you might come out with 3 things, right? So right now you can physically see, because of the nonsense this guy is pulling, you can physically see how much of your dollar is being eroded by sitting there in savings, right? Before, in previous administrations, it wasn't as easy to see that. So people would be real comfortable just saving, and they wouldn't really see the little 5 cents every 6 months, you know what I mean, that things cost on each item in the shopping cart, but right now, like, you can see it. So once that clicks, me saying it might not make it click, but once that clicks, you won't be able to stomach it. You won't be able to stomach the savings. Yes, you'll have your emergency fund, and it'll get to the point where you may even have multiple emergency funds, right? And as you get older, emergency funds should get bigger as well, right? But you have your emergency funds, you have your ad hoc cash and all of that, but it'll sicken you to not be investing because you'll literally be throwing your money away. It'll turn your stomach once it clicks, So, and it's okay if it hasn't clicked yet. It's all right. We all grow at different rates, man, It's going to be a personal journey, but once it clicks, you're going to be on. Hopefully it don't click and you're broke. Right? Hopefully that's not what happens. But once it clicks, you're going to be on. Listen, it ain't no shade at all. I was hard-headed. It clicked for me when I was broke. Right? So I was once the hard-headed one. That's why I don't take no excuses now, because I was the one who was full of all of them. Right? So when I talk about not taking excuses, it's not like I think I'm better than anybody. I was the hard-headed one that it didn't click till I was broke, had to start from the bottom, homelessness and all of that. Yeah, and it was my fault. I could have done better had I just listened, but I didn't. So it is what it is. But I get it. I understand. I definitely relate to the hard-headed ones, and I know that ain't nothing I say gonna change them until something happens in their life that changes themselves. So I say the things, so they hear it, and then when that rock bottom hits, they'll think it's their own conscience. I had this great thought. I know I did the same thing. I know I popped up, was like, what? I had this great thought. And really it was somebody who told me that 20 years ago. Yeah, I just don't remember the conversation, but it's in there. So that's it. That's all you can do. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It happens. You know what I mean? It just is what it is, man. Hey, thanks a lot, Charm. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Thank you. Oh man. Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. Is it what is it? Tony. Tony. Oh, okay, all right. Y'all be using all the little squiggly stuff to write your name and all that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. What's the difference between what's the difference investing in the U.S. stock market or the Kenyan Treasury bond? Well, when you buy a stock, the money is absorbed into the stock, right? So when you sell the stock and you realize the gain or the loss, that's it. Or if that stock crashes, you lose everything, right? Because it's a stock. A bond is actually you acting as the bank, no matter what kind of bond it is, whether it's a treasury bond or whether it's a corporate bond. Whoever you're giving the money to is treating you as a bank. So a bond is saying, hey, loan me $100,000. I will pay you 10% interest on a 30-year mortgage, essentially, right? I'm going to give you a 30-year mortgage. I'm going to pay you 30% or 10% interest on your $100,000, right? So then that's, you should be getting $10,000 a year, right? And so at the end of the mortgage, or at the end of the loan, rather, you get what? You get the 100,000 back as well. Same thing as when you take a loan, right? You take $1,000. What's that called? That's the principal of the loan, right? What are you paying for the first half? The first half of that loan, what are you paying? You paying principal? You're paying interest, right? So you took $100,000, you end up paying back $250,000, right? Because you're paying interest on top of the principal. So you pay the 100,000 back plus the interest, and typically it sucks when you're the one who has to pay it. What a bond is the government or the corporation that issued that debt paying you as the bank. So now you're getting the principal and the interest over the amount of years that is the maturity of the bond. So you get your money back plus the ROI, which is typically why bonds have a lower interest rate and you can make more money in stocks, because this is a developing country and they need the money to develop. Here, bonds have a higher interest rate than the S&P 500 index. S&P 500 averages 10% a year, or 10.5 depending on, whose average you're reading, right? The smallest bond in the report that I just showed was 12% a year, right? So you're beating the S&P just with that loan, right? So that ends up being the difference. Now, that shouldn't be your full portfolio, of course. Eventually, you want to diversify. But because the interest rate on the bonds are so high right now, you can actually put yourself in a position for the people who want to move here. They can actually put themselves in a position where if they get the bond ladder, they could never have to work again. But they definitely wouldn't have to work for at least 10 years. They'd be getting a check from the government for at least 10 years until that loan matures. And then they get the initial money that they put in back as well, right? So the loan will mature, they get the interest, that's the ROI, they'll get that interest payment, and then at the end they get the full amount of money back. Unless it's amortized. If it's amortized, then you still get the full amount of money back, but they give it to you early. So it's like paying your mortgage early, right? If it's amortized, they might say, okay, you gave us 500,000, and we're paying you 10%, but halfway through we're going to give you 250 back. So now there's only 250 left that we're paying the interest on, right? And then, halfway of what's left, we're going to give you, 150 back. So now there's only 100 left, and then we're going to let the 100 ride until the end of the loan. That's what amortization means. Typically, you only see an amortization on an infrastructure bond. What makes an infrastructure bond different is they're tax exempt. So the government is trying to get that monkey off its back because it can't charge any taxes on it. So they try to pay you back quick, so that you're in a taxable situation again, right? So that's how that works. All right. Hopefully that answered your question. No, I don't really visit the U.S. Yeah, especially now, man. I don't want any. I don't want any nonsense. I ain't trying to be pulled over by ICE or nothing like that. I'm good. Maybe in a couple years I'll go visit, but I don't go back often. I don't go back at all, really. So yeah. No, that's a really good question. No, if you have a Class K permit, your ordinary residency permit, which means that you're moving towards dual citizenship in Kenya. Part of that permit is that you don't work in Kenya, right? Some people confuse that with you're not allowed to make money in Kenya. That's not true. You're just not allowed to. You don't have working papers essentially. You're an immigrant awaiting, dual citizenship, and you don't have working papers. So you can invest in anything you want. So you can make passive income all day, all night, but you can't have the equivalent of a W 2 job. You can't take a job from a Kenyan, you know what I mean, and then still be on the path to dual citizenship. And that's typically when it's going to hurt you, right? So when you apply for your dual citizenship, you're going to get a no based on whether or not they see that you essentially violated, the covenant of the Class K permit. If you have a Class G permit, then you're allowed to work, but then you're not in line for dual citizenship. You're in line for permanent residence. So then it's like you're going for the equivalent of like a U.S. green card, right? So if you're going for dual citizenship, then this is a really good option because it's all passive income, so it wouldn't violate you not having working papers. All the time. Yeah, we have clients that invest all the time remotely. Yeah, and basically never come here. Like they own Airbnbs and all of that, or apartment buildings, and all of that, but they don't live here. Yeah, that's just a misunderstanding about Africa. Essentially, we got plenty of people that like pay their American mortgage off the money they make in Africa, make way more money in American dollars here than they can make in the United States. Hey, Michelle, how's it going? Yeah, yep, yeah, no problem. Right. So we have been here for what? 1 hour and 49 minutes. Any other questions on any of our generational wealth programs or our relocation programs? Thanks for the likes, guys. On the TikTok side, if you're watching on one of the other streams, there is no liking mechanism, I don't think, anyway. Um, hey, great to see you too, kind of. Great to be seen. How is everything? Hope the family is well. As a resident, do you still structure companies across the world, e.g., the U.S., to take advantage of? Let me wait for you to finish. In case you didn't realize it, George, you didn't finish that sentence. So I'm waiting for you to finish, but in case you're not typing, I'm waiting on you. better credit terms, grants, or I'm not sure there's better entrepreneur support programs. So I would kind of push back on that. Not even sure there's better grants, but there's definitely better credit terms. And that's not an African thing. So even if you're opening up a company in Europe, US credit terms are better. If you're opening up a company in Australia, US credit terms are better. So if you can have a US parent company, credit terms wise, having that US parent company might be better. Some countries hit you with additional tax if you're a foreign owned company, which might erode the better credit terms. However, even in those situations, sometimes the US system is better because you can do a Chapter 11 restructure, right? So you can file a corporate bankruptcy, even if the terms are worse or even if you have to pay more tax. You can, take your credit terms in the United States, and then if it doesn't work out, which often happens to business people, businesses fail all the time, and then you have to start over. So if the business fails, then you just file bankruptcy, right? Not every country has that. So that safety net sometimes makes, U.S. organizations a better financing engine, because you may not have to pay it back, essentially. So there's that, right? So it just depends. It boils down to exactly what you're doing, exactly where you're doing it, um, you know, and whether or not, like right now, they're building Silicon Savannah. You can Google that, right? So Silicon Savannah is something that's being built in Kenya, and it's akin to Silicon Valley, right? So if that's the kind of business you're in, I'm not sure there's better entrepreneur support in America. I'm not sure there's better grant programs in America. Because if you're aligning with the goals of the country, there should be support there for you, right? Now, if you just want to do what you want to do, which I see a lot of people make that mistake, I just want to do what I want to do and I want to do it wherever I want to do it. Well, then you might be doing something in a country that does not support what you're doing, not necessarily in the sense that they don't want to see you do it. It's just not on their agenda. So now there's not support programs for you, and there's not, whatever for you in that regard. So as long as you align what you're doing with the agenda for that country, you'll be fine. There's definitely going to be support for you. Does the foreign residency water down the investability of the holding company? Huh. So the holding company, I'm assuming what you're calling the holding company is a U.S. company? Is a U.S. company the holding company? And then your foreign residency water down the investability of the holding company? That's an interesting question. U.S. based, for example. Okay, so the holding company is in the U.S. No one should be investing in the holding company because the whole point of the holding company is protection. So I don't see how foreign residency would water down the investability of the holding company because no one should invest in the holding company, right? The holding company should be holding the IP, should be now there might be a bundle, right? So like somebody who's investing in your operating company that sees that you have a holding company might be like, wait a minute, I don't want to invest in the operating company and I don't get an upside on the IP. So that could happen. But I don't think so. I can't imagine, and maybe my limited imagination at the moment, but I can't imagine a situation where the holding company affects the investability of the operating company outside of the fact that the investor might want some of the upside of the IP that's sitting in the holding company, right? Which can be handled by a licensing deal. So I don't know. I don't now. From the other side of things, if your operating company is registered in a place where your investors don't understand the court system, right? Hold on. This look like, oh wait, hold on. I don't know why it filtered. Maybe you commented too quickly or something. Let me approve it so it can show up. All right. So if your operating company is registered in a place where your investors are uncertain of the court system and how the court system plays out, that could affect investability, right? So you'll get a lot of, like, especially if you're dealing with American investors, you'll get a lot of them that'll say like, well, wait a minute, can you create a parent company, not a holding company, but can you create a parent company in Delaware as a C corp? Because they know what the Delaware Chancery Court is going to rule in that court system, right? So now they're more comfortable because they're like, okay, now if you do X, Y, and Z with the money, I know I can sue you in Delaware and I know what the judge is going to say, right? So I can predict what's going to happen if I have to come after you. So in those regards, but that's going to be a parent company, not necessarily a holding company. So you're taking advantage of debt interest rates with the U.S. company for operations in Kenya. What does that look like? So that would look something like your U.S. company owns whatever percentage your financier requires, typically 25%. So your U.S. company would own 25% of your Kenyan company, and both companies have to be doing the same thing. Then you would take a business loan out for that thing from the parent company, and you would spend it on operations in Kenya for the same thing, right? That's important, right? And then you would pay that loan back, right? You would, or make a good faith attempt to pay that loan back. If that didn't work, then you would probably file bankruptcy. But that wouldn't affect what was going on in Kenya, right? Like, the trustee in the bankruptcy court couldn't really reach into Kenya and spread the Kenyan assets out amongst, whoever. But you got to sit down and speak to your bankruptcy attorney about that, your corporate bankruptcy attorney about that, because there's time limits, right? So if it happens too quickly, if you file that bankruptcy too quickly, that's going to create a problem. There's a certain amount of time between the time that you take the financing and the time that you file the bankruptcy that needs to be there, or else it's just like a fraudulent conveyance. And then they will order you. They still can't reach into Kenya and take it, but they'll order you to do it. And then if you don't comply with the judge's orders, then you might get locked up. So, you definitely speak to your local attorney. Make sure that you understand the rules of how that works. But I mean, how many times did Donald Trump do it? 6, 7? So, I mean, it's doable. You just got to do it the right way. Just got to have a team. The people who try to do everything themselves, they go to jail. This is all there is to it. Like at this level, they go to prison, right? So just make sure you have a team together and you're consulting your team on both sides and all of that. And then rock out. And the goal shouldn't necessarily be to file bankruptcy. It's a safety net. So there really should be really good faith effort to win and be able to pay that loan back, because quite frankly, if you build a great relationship with that financer, they're going to give you more and more and more and more and more money, right? So which you're going to need in the future. So if you can make it happen, we got 4 buildings behind us that do $500 a night in Airbnb, and they have 100% occupancy for 4 months out of the year, what we call high season. Almost everybody has 100% occupancy for those 4 months out of the year. So they're doing, what is it, 150,000? They're doing 300,000 a year, right? They're doing $300,000 a year in Kenya, right? With those 4 Airbnbs, right? And so they paid back their loan. They took their loan from the U.S. They paid that loan back, right? So now their ability to take money from that same institution in the U.S. has I think they took 150,000 or something like that in order to get it done in the first time around. Now they can take 2.5 million, right? Because number one, there's that money flowing through their organization. So, the financial institution sees the income. That income is tax exempt because it's pushed back to the United States as a dividend to their C Corp. So when you push a dividend back to a parent company that owns at least 10% of the company that's pushing the dividend, then that's called a foreign dividend received deduction. A foreign dividends received deduction. Go to the IRS's website and see what the percentage of the deduction is. It's 100%. So they're getting their money tax-free into their C Corp. Now, mind you, when it comes out of the C Corp, it gets paid whatever. There's either payroll tax or whatever tax, whatever. But it's getting pushed back into the USA at 0%. So that's what the bank sees. The bank is seeing what's coming into the bank. So the bank is seeing that consistent $300,000 coming in, every year. And that's just on, one thing, right? So that's how it plays out. Like the goal shouldn't be I'm going to file a bankruptcy. It's a safety net where like I'm going to try to make this thing happen. If the thing don't happen, I'm not paying them back. Like that's business, right? I'm going to file bankruptcy. That's going to be the end of it. So that's kind of the bonus of funding out of the U.S. The downside is you typically need corporate credit, which takes 2 years to build. So if you don't already have corporate credit, it might slow you down. Yeah, it's part of the price. It's all inclusive. So part of the price for the investment laddering is the trust fund. So yeah, all that's set up for you. There's no function of any package that we present that we don't do for. So we don't set up people for failure because typically we're with them for about 7 years. So it doesn't make sense. Some of these like relocation coaches and all of that stuff, after they do the smallest bit for you, like they get you maybe the visa or they get you the permit to come here, they're gone. Like they've done their job. It's over, right? Our firm is there until you get to the other side of whatever it is we're doing. So if it's immigration, it's until you get to why did it filter your comment? But there we go. Until you get either your permanent residency or you get your dual citizenship, which takes 7 years, or if it's with the generational wealth, we're actually with you forever, right? And unless you remove the trustee corporation, which you have the right to do, but the trustee corporation is affiliated with us, and we're with you, and that corporation is with you like in perpetuity, right? So yeah, if it's a succession planning, that's all part of it as well. Now your corporate succession planning, no, just your like trust fund setup of succession planning with the beneficiaries and all of that, yes. How's it going, Spellcoin? What can we do for you today? All right. So yeah. What's the difference between corporate? So your corporate succession planning is like going to be based on your internal documents, like your bylaws or your partnership agreement or your operating agreement. Depends on what kind of structure you're using. So like who takes over as CEO and all that. That's like an internal corporate mechanism. We're not necessarily in your business just because we're helping you set things up. So as far as that's concerned, that's an internal whatever. But if we set up your trust fund, we have to generate your title deed. And when we set up their title deed, sorry, your trust deed. So once we set up trust deed, it'll show what the requirements are to be a beneficiary, right? And then so as you leave this world, which everybody eventually does, and your things get passed on to the next generation, it will break down exactly how that works. And so that's the succession planning that's built into your trust plan and your trust deed typically. So yeah, all of that's taken care of. Thank you. Oh man, I mean, the trust can protect from so much, but it really, really, really benefits the next generation. But it protects you as well. There's a seasoning period on most trusts. So the faster you start a trust, right? We get people who open up trusts and put nothing in them just to get them started, right? Because the faster you set up a trust, the closer you are to your seasoning period. Once you cross the seasoning period, the trust is authentic, right? So what ends up happening is like if let's say you get engaged to be married, and as a response to the engagement, you create a trust. That trust is null and void. because you did it in response to the engagement. But let's say there's a generational wealth trust. Your grandpa created a trust and he set things up a certain way, and you don't really have any money. The trust takes care of all your needs, right? And it's an offshore trust, so it's not under the jurisdiction of the local courts. And at that point, no one can question the trust, right? So when that person, attempts to divorce you and takes half your stuff, there's nothing for them, right? There, you don't own anything to take, right? And no one can claim that you created that trust in response to the marriage just to defraud the spouse, because the trust was around for 100 years before you were born, right? So the longer the trust is in existence, the more powerful and the more concrete that trust is, and essentially no one can break it. So the weakest part of the trust is within the first 2 years of you creating it. That's the weakest point of the trust. Yeah, I mean, if it's written crappily, but if it's written crappily, it won't even last 100 years. So if you try to write it yourself, or we've seen people have Chat GPT write their irrevocable trust documents and file them. Oh yeah, plenty of people up shit creek, because now a judge has to revoke that trust because they didn't even give themselves the ability to change the trust and just went with Chat GPT. Y'all got to use common sense sometimes, right? If that worked, think about the greediest guys on the planet, right? If that worked, do you think Elon Musk would have a staff? The guy who fired half of Twitter as soon as he bought it, you think he would still have a legal team if you could go to ChatGPT and have legal documents drafted? Right? Just use a little common sense sometimes, right? The biggest guys on the planet. You think Bill Gates would have a legal team anymore if you could go to ChatGPT and have legal documents drafted? You think Jeff Bezos would be paying millions of dollars a year for a legal team if you could go to ChatGPT and have a legal document drafted? Stop it with the nonsense. Just use just some common sense. Just think about it, right? It doesn't work that way yet. Maybe in the future it will. It does not work that way yet. Stop that. People messing themselves up big time with ChatGPT, and we end up seeing it because of the work we do. So how many more people are doing it that aren't working with our law firm? So, they don't even realize they done screwed themselves up and might even be operating illegally because they might be violating their own trust. Right? May end up in prison for embezzling their own stuff because they're violating their own trust because they let Chat GPT write the trust deed. So I need y'all to have some common sense, please. The amount of people we see messing themselves up like that, and it's expensive to fix. It's an irrevocable trust. Don't play with them. If you got some burning desire to play with trust, play with a revocable one, not an irrevocable one. Yeah. No, I mean, geez, we're only in February. We've seen 3 already this year. It's damn near 1 a week. So the Chat GPT thing is horrible. People really think that it can just do anything. Or because they don't know anything, when they read whatever Chat GPT gives them, oh yeah, it sounds right. Makes sense. No, it doesn't. It's wrong. So, please do yourself a favor. Go get a free consultation or something. There's plenty of, our firm doesn't offer them, but there's plenty of firms that'll talk to you for 30 minutes, for free. Just go talk to somebody. Yeah, spend money on that, but stop with the GPT nonsense. Not for legal documents or medical documents. Jesus. We had one of those last year. The medical no medical ones. I don't care if it's DeepSeek or Grok. It doesn't matter. No medical, no law. Do yourself a favor. You're right. Or tax. No medical, no law, no tax. You're right. Thank you for the caveat. Best protection I've ever seen. There's a bloodline clause in a lot of our generational wealth trusts that people opt to have. There was a daughter who was like being bratty about the bloodline clause because she's a female and she's pushing out the baby. So why does she need a blood test? Blah 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 blah. And our corporate trustee was like, "Look, you don't have to have the blood test. Your kid's just going to be written out of the trust. You will get nothing." So that it is what it is. Have the blood test or don't, but that's what the trust deed says. I don't have discretion to break the trust deed. You get the blood test or you don't. She had an emergency C-section. Baby was rushed to the NICU. Baby came out of the NICU a day or two later. And then they authorized after the baby's clear, before the baby's clear, there can't be any unnecessary tests. After the baby's clear, do the DNA test. Baby's not related to her. Babies got switched during the emergency, situation. There were other women with emergency C-sections. Baby got switched. Luckily, all of the emergency C-section babies were there, right? So then the hospital ended up having to do blood tests on all of them and finding the right baby. She never complained to the trustee again, right? Sometimes people's heads are stuck on, weird things. Nobody said you cheated on your man, right? It just says that in order to be in the trust, everybody has to be part of the bloodline, right? And that clause saved her from taking someone else's baby home, right, and raising the wrong child for the next however many years until that baby needs blood or the baby needs an organ or something, and you figure it out. So that's one of the best protections that I've seen just pop out of a trust deed. I've also seen plenty of people that were getting divorced by folks who wanted half of what they saw and thought it was just theirs, find out that they don't own any of it, and child support set at $50, and there's nothing for them to take. So that's always a beautiful thing. But yeah, there's a bunch of like ancillary benefits that just pop up, you know. That's one of the good things about experience is that over the years, the firms get to see all these, cute little benefits that pop up that no one was thinking about, and then you get to write for them. So then you get to tell your clients, like, let me tell you a story. This just happened, and then it went to court. This is what the judge said. So now, in the trust deed, we write it this way, and then we pull on that case as case law. You know what I mean? To help future judges rule in the same way if it ever, goes to court. But I'd say like maybe 5 to 10% of trust funds that we've been involved with even go to court. Typically, the trust deed is requested in discovery. The trust deed is, examined, and then they settle because they know they can't get anything. So then they turn around and they're like, oh, okay. There was a guy who he sold his business. I want to say he sold his business for, I want to say it was 30 million, right? He had a fleet of trash trucks all over the Northeast, right? So it was a trash truck business, but it was big, like 4 or 5 states, whatever. And this guy comes in, buys the business. He just doesn't have the same personality as the guy who sold the business. So he can't run the business very well, starts losing money, comes back, I think it was 3 years later, and tries to sue our guy for all of it, for like the 30 million back, for like failure to disclose and the blah, 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 blah. Ran into the trust and they settled for 150,000 from 30 million to 150,000 because he wasn't going to get shit because that trust was in place, right? And it had been in place long enough that they couldn't, claim that it was a fraudulent conveyance. So, getting the trust set up as early as possible allows that clock to start, ticking. That makes the trust, legitimate. Of course, there are other aspects. That's a simplified overview, but one of the most important things is how old is the trust. Now, you can set the trust up that nothing in it is marital property, period. Right? So if that happens, then what happens is if you put something in the trust while you're married, your spouse would essentially sign off that both of you understand it's not marital property, which applies equally to the both of you, obviously, right? So so you can set that up. Most of our trusts are set up that way because when you look at like the Vanderbilts and how they lost their money, most of the way that they lost their money is that their trust did not protect itself from marital property, and so they would have, you know, 6, 7 ex-wives, and each one take half of whatever was in the trust in that moment, right? And so that's why, um, you know, the Vanderbilts lost all their money. Sucks. Yeah, the living Vanderbilt heir is Anderson Cooper. His name isn't even Vanderbilt anymore. And when he was born, he got no money. He was the first Vanderbilt heir born that got nothing. Like the trust was dead. Now, obviously, like he made himself a millionaire. He's on TV. He's on, like, you know what I mean. So there's still cultural and social capital, you know, that came from, you know, being at that tier of society. But financially wise, yeah. Yeah. Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt. Yep. All right. We have been here for 2 hours and 16 minutes. Any other questions on any of this stuff? Or are we done? Any other questions on any of this stuff? Any questions on generational wealth, relocation, investing, global investments? You can take an assessment on our website. The assessment will typically tell you whether you qualify to work with us on anything or not. Sometimes there's nuance. So typically our lawyers will reach out to you, and, you know, just go over whatever, or even let you know, give you some value, let you know like what you need to do to get to a point where you can execute. So yeah. What would you do if you were 30 again with one child? So I'm 44. I have one child. I have a baby. I have a 22-month old. So, you know, but if I were 30 again, 30, maybe I'm too close to 30. Maybe I wouldn't have done anything different because I'm so close to 30 now, right? But maybe I moved over here permanently. You know, I was coming back and forth at 30. So I think maybe at 30, I would have maybe moved here permanently, and taken that plunge. Because had I been here during COVID, it would be I would be at a very different bank account level. So so yeah, I mean probably I would have moved sooner. The US didn't motivate me to leave yet at 30. So I was kind of like farting around in Philly at that time, but yeah, you know, if I mean, I would probably move at 21 if I could go back knowing what I know now. But hindsight's always 2020, right? Yeah, right. With the knowledge I have now, right? Right. But some of it, I mean, so like, if I didn't live in China, you know, when I was, I don't know, I guess I lived there from 27 to 30 actually. But if I didn't live in China and I didn't speak Chinese, like our construction deals, we wouldn't be able to do them, right? So for us to do that end of year special, would that wouldn't even be possible? Not at that price point. Uh oh. Uh oh. Hold on, I'm coming back online. Give me a moment. Sorry about that. Had a little online glitch there. Am I back? Hit me up in the chat. Let me know if I'm back on TikTok. Sorry about that. Had a. All right, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, living in China, learning Chinese, making friends in China, even learning Chinese really doesn't matter, but having like real friends that, from living there, was there when they had their babies and like, that type of stuff, having actual social and cultural connection there, that helped a lot. So, I mean, there's stuff you got to go through, I guess. But I definitely want to, I don't think I needed to live in the United States to necessarily do those things. So I definitely would have left the United States earlier. Definitely, definitely, definitely. It's easier to leverage the U.S. from a distance, which is why you have so many expats living all over the place, and they're just like not telling the secret, right? Like when I went to China, tons of Americans living in China, as expats making big money, and all of that. They just don't talk about it, but it's way easier to leverage the United States when you don't live there. All right. All right. Do we got anything else? Anything else? My son's about to wake up. I think he might have just woken up actually. My work day's about to start too. It's about to be 9 o'clock. It's 8:53 a.m. right now. Anything else, you guys? All right, all right, all right. Thanks for hanging out with me, folks. We are switching to like a show format in a day or two. So these lives will be way more sporadic, but there should be way more content. So all relocation info on the site. On the site, there's the number one thing that you're going to do is a free assessment. It doesn't cost anything, and it'll let you know like what kind of relocation stuff you even qualify for. And then from there, one of our attorneys or somebody in our organization, sometimes it's even me, will just email you and say, "Hey, saw that you filled out the assessment. You know, these are the reasons why it said you weren't qualified, or you seem very qualified. Let's talk about it. Whatever the case may be." And then we just go from there. We're really high touch, so we don't. There's not a whole lot of like go click here, buy online, you ain't talk to nobody type of thing. You'll have a whole legal team at your disposal. When you onboard, you get your own like client portal. And inside that portal, you can ask our attorneys anything, anytime, day or night. They might not get back to you right away, but they typically get back to you within 24 hours and go from there. So, yeah. Oh, thank you. Same to you. All right, guys. All right, I will see you soon. Talk to you guys. I think I will be here tomorrow, but tomorrow might be the last day. All right, so we'll be here around the same time tomorrow, and then we'll switch to that show format, and then a lot of information will be on YouTube, and then there'll be the small clips on TikTok. So follow whatever streaming service that you're following us on. If you're on YouTube, if you're on TikTok, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Fanbase, Instagram, follow whichever account that you're watching me on right now, and then you'll start seeing those clips pop up. All right, guys, see you later.